We have with us Dr. K. Seetha, visiting professor, University of Tokyo. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
The NDCP talks about $100 billion investment over 4 to 5 years.
$100 billion.
$100 billion investment over 4 to 5 years.
Okay.
So how do we see such large infrastructure investment coming to India? What has been your experience?
Learning from the experience of Asian countries which have recently grown significantly. First of all, infrastructure has to be a significant quotient of the investment that go in the country from the government, from the private sector, and also from local. When I say private sector, it's not only from within the country, from outside the country, because that gives a level of confidence on the future of the economy. Mm-hmm. The second part is the financing has to be again something which is motivating for others to put in more funds. So we need to harvest the full potential of the benefits that come from digital infrastructure. Digital infrastructure cuts across 3 layers of the economy. First is mobility. With digital infrastructure, what happens is that we complement and also enhance the mobility of the people, because we can then work without having to commute, we can then do commerce without having to commute. So digital infrastructure gives a new boost for the mobility infrastructure. Otherwise, we are building lots of roads and infrastructure. So this actually compensates because you're avoiding unnecessary travel. Then the digital infrastructure gives another boost to the economy, which is tourism revenue. Lots of tourism revenue comes when the place is easily accessible and you get information about it. So that is the second kind of infrastructure benefit that we have. The third aspect that we get is basically the livelihood of the people. That is, we are empowering people. With digital infrastructure, people can access an information without having to go there, without having to find it out on their own physically, but they can do it through the internet, through the technology. So these will give a new dividend, as what we call. And the quantum has to be significant in terms of speed, in terms of reliability, in terms of penetration, as what we call. We have to reach it to as many people. It's not only the people who already have connection have faster connection. That is one aspect. The people who don't have connection must have not the slow connection. They must have the fast connection, because then the economy grows. So for that, financing mechanisms can be again in 3 ways. Of course, government is the natural player, but government need not subsidize. They can be on a corporate principles where the money they put provides some kind of motivation for the private sector to put their money where they are maybe risk averse and they are hesitant to put. Second is government can create a policy environment where when somebody is investing, they want returns. But returns can be in many ways. It need not be only in tariffs and profits. It can be also on future dividends in terms of having tax breaks and incentives for them to invest even more. Then comes the third part. Citizens will have to start using it, because if people don't use infrastructure, it becomes not very potentially meaningful. So we need to encourage people to use it. For that, we have to have lots of motivational mechanism. That is, you encourage them to use, or you give them incentives initially to use in terms of access, discount, easy to use, and so on. So that requires a concerted effort. And India has a huge potential because of a large population. And it is difficult for us to leapfrog to a giant economy without getting this, what we call as a digital infrastructure in place. We should not talk about bottlenecks anymore. We need to make it empowering. That means we need to build the infrastructure which is good for next 20 years, not like filling the gap of the last 10 years. So these are my views based on what we learned from other countries.
So what should be the 3 steps to kickstart this?
So using the jargon word PPP, the first P is policy. Policy has been created. The number has been mentioned. Now we need to show that the policy will be implemented without having any changes along the road, because that is what private sector and investors look for. Policy means there's a consistent thinking and we are not changing course midway. Next is we need to create large programs, which government has a responsibility again. So the programs has to be visionary again, and it should be an all-encompassing. That means we're talking of 20 years horizon. What are the things that you want to implement to get it done? Then significant projects. Initial projects must be game changers. That means they must be very successful and they should motivate others to get into the game. So these are the things that we should get started in terms of 3 steps. Good policy, show the commitment to implement, then good programs which are multi-year programs, then solid projects which all kick off the ground, ease of business, people are ready to play the game, and they say, yes, it works, and there are no roadblocks along the way. So these will create confidence and get more infrastructure investment to happen.
Any countries which India can replicate or which India can learn or fine-tune
Well,
the digital infrastructure part?
There are many examples. Of course, in our region, small in terms of size, but relevant to us is Singapore, which has gone in a big way. Korea, South Korea has gone in a big way. Of course, China, always an example, but very large country. So all these are good examples for us to look at. And India can be also an example because we can do in a different way. Actually, the telecom sector and the digital infrastructure, we have shown that we can give telecom connectivity much faster, much lesser prices. So I think we have a huge potential and maybe a role to play to create a game changer effect because we have a huge population of consumers who are potential market for the entire global economy.
So what are the learnings you mentioned about China, you mentioned about Singapore, so you mentioned about all other Asian economies?
Infrastructure creates the economic potential. So the infrastructure has to be kind of ahead of the curve rather than catching up to fill bottleneck. So that is the first and most important message. So the visionary thinking and then putting the first dollar on the table and then creating an enabling environment so that people believe that, in private sector particularly, because this requires a lot of huge investments, long-term investments coming from private sector for it to be sustainable and successful. So the government needs to be like kind of a convener, need not be so much as a regulator initially. Initially create more of opportunity and then regulate. So these are some of the things that happens in other countries and we can learn from that.
How does your institute can help India in terms of digital infrastructure?
Well, we have two roles to play. First, we can do these kind of seminars that we are having today here. So sharing of experience from other countries, we can bring experts and practitioners from other countries who are willing to share, and I think they also want to participate in the process that India is going through. Next is we can work together to create what we call as demonstration activities. So there's a demonstration projects where it's also a learning opportunity, in which case we can learn from our own example. And that's far more compelling and convincing rather than learning from example done in another country and listening to a PowerPoint presentation. So both these will, I think, create a lot of confidence for us to move forward. And I see in this conference, as I see, there are giant players in India, and they can now make their work like a laboratory, because initially we need to collaborate a lot and learn from each other so that we can open the market much bigger so that more players will come from outside our country also.
Thanks, sir. Thanks for talking to DJ Analysis.
Most welcome.